If anyone knows how, let me know. All right. So today we have a bit of a detailed topic, so I want to just go ahead and get started. This way. Okay. Hey everyone, thank you for joining me tonight on massive topic that's should be at least massive for all rising seniors at the moment, because July is the time to work on your college essay, because come August, you'll have supplemental essays that you need to get done. So if you start on your college essay right now, then supplemental essays happen next month. And of course, depending on how much summer homework you have, the reading, the AP classes and notes stuff that you have to submit, that's all going to be ongoing. But hopefully, teens, you guys have been working on that already. If you're a rising senior, assume that this is the freest, the most amount of time you will have for yourself. So June or July, August, once school starts, you're going to be busy. It doesn't matter if you're not taking any AP classes. It doesn't matter if you don't have any ECE classes. If you're mostly in standard and honors classes, it doesn't matter, because at that point you'll level up with your sports or your other activities. But ultimately, it's rare for a senior to have a lot of free time. That's not to say you're going to be miserable. It's just you have one activity after another. And doing college applications just becomes a little bit harder, or a lot harder, once you wait until school year starts. So right now, the main thing you want to be working on is your college essay. And speaking of college essays, let's dive right into it. Hello, I'm Priyanka. For everyone who might be watching this on YouTube or the recording later on, college admissions advisor for over 10 years. And yes, my website and email have changed. It used to be letstalkcollege.org. Now it's letstalkcollege.co. And I'm sure for anyone who's on my mailing list, you have access to me easily. You just have to hit reply on any of the emails I sent. And if you want to just shoot me an email with questions along the way, then here is my email as well. So topics we're going to cover today. What is a college essay? And we're going to take a look at the college essay prompts. Some of you, for the teens, you might have done this at the end of your school year, especially if you were in an AP Lang class or an expository writing or creative writing class. Then you might have already started on these and be familiar with at least the topics, even if you don't know what it is you want to write about. Then we have the different types of college essays that pop up. So that really depends on the universities you want to apply to. There are some slight criteria differences. So we'll take a look at those. Even if they don't apply to you, I want to make sure you're aware of it, so that if a friend is doing it or someone else is doing it and you hear about it, you're not freaking out that, oh my God, should I have been doing that too? Did I miss something? Now you know for sure that it doesn't apply to you, because it only applies to these groups of individuals. Characteristics of good essays. We're actually going to take a look at a couple of sample intros. So we'll see some good hooks. How do you grab an admissions officer's attention? Then common mistakes I've been seeing. So right now we're in the middle of our 2-week July college essay intensive, and you might have gotten emails about that previously. I know I do a poor job of sending out emails, so I want to say I'm working to improve upon that. But considering how exhausted I end up at the end of the day, now that the seniors are working on the college essays, I'm putting that on my to-do list, but I cannot confirm that it will happen immediately. But I am working. I know it is on my mind. But the mistakes that most teens make, particularly ones I've seen in this 2-week intensive that we're in the middle of right now, because they're all strong students, but they're still messing up in tiny ways that I honestly would not have thought to address out loud, because I wouldn't have. Some things are just very subtle, and it doesn't occur that, oh, we should actually talk about it. So that's part of what I'm addressing today with the characteristics of a good essay. Sample essays will actually be the samples that we're taking a look at, but I'll also give you an archive, which, if you've heard me speak before, it will be the Johns Hopkins essays that worked. That's the archive I'll be referring to. And then finding your own topic. So just what to think about. If you're completely drawing a blank, how do you even tease it out of yourself? How do you poke at the activities you've been doing at the accomplishments you might have had. Or the worst case thing is sometimes a lot of our activities are just so routine. Even if it's something massive we've done, to us, they feel routine until we tell that story to somebody else. So the idea is to take a step back and realize, oh, wait, that thing I do is kind of cool, or that thing I do is worth talking about, or I can use that thing I do to talk about this other bigger picture concept that is valuable to me. So we'll talk about all of this in the next few minutes. So first up, what is a college essay? Now, college essay is basically a 650 word maximum conversation between you and the admissions officer. It's 11 o'clock and they're on their third cup of coffee. Okay, so this is not somebody who's awake, alert. They have a huge pile of things they need to get done. They have a deadline because they also have to let their team know so that their team can then start filtering, because ultimately you need to be told of your acceptance or rejection by a certain date, right? That's what all of these universities have promised us is, oh, you'll know by mid-December, you'll know by mid-January, you'll know by mid-March whether or not you got in. Well, that means that behind the scenes, these admissions officers have to go through 20,000, 30,000, 50,000, 100,000 or more applications to get it down to those 2,000 to 6,000 individuals who will be accepted into that university. So you're trying, and this is important. It's very, very important to be aware, be very mindful of who your audience is, because if you've taken AP Lang, my AP Lang students sometimes end up being the worst college essay writers because they've spent a whole year training their minds on looking for these subtle symbolism and foreshadowing and emotional appeal and all of these rhetorical devices, these literary devices, and just analyzing a small piece of writing until it's stripped apart of everything. So they've trained their minds to look for these subtle. But that makes it hard to write a college essay because a college essay is almost a 9th or 10th grade level of writing in terms of content, okay? So, or in terms of style, rather. You're not trying to be overly impressive in your writing style. You need to be obvious. You're not trying to wait for the reader to draw this conclusion. You're just going to make that statement and be direct. Remember, this person is sleep deprived. They have a whole pile of essays and paperwork to get through, even if it's online. They have all of this to get through, and they're not reading your essay. They're skimming. So it has to, if you have blobs and chunks of paragraphs, those are not getting read. They probably aren't even fully getting comprehended in the skimming. So you have to play with the spacing. So there's lots of subtle things to be aware of when you are writing your college essay. But at the end of the day, just remember, if you are sleep deprived or if you're exhausted and you still have work to get done, all of us will rush through everything, right? We will skim. We want to get this done with. We have a deadline. We mean well. We are well-intentioned, but we need this done. So put yourself in those shoes and then think about what kind of writing you would want to see. Now, before I continue, just a quick note. I forgot to say it earlier, but if you have any questions, then by all means, I will have stopping points in between where you can pop out with your questions, or you can just post them in the chat at any point, and I will be keeping track of the chat, okay? So with that said, back on this. College essay prompts, these have not changed in about 20 years. There's been 1 or 2 changes about every 10 years. Number 4 came in during COVID, but that's the last change that happened, I think in 2021 or 2022. I think 2021. And here are the topics we have. Something about your background, identity, your interest, and talent that's so meaningful that you have to include it in your application. Lessons we take from obstacles we encounter. Basically, what happened? What did you learn from that experience? Number 3 is reflect on a time you questioned or challenged a belief or an idea. Basically, what poked at you? Why did that get triggered in the first place? What brought up that conversation? And then what happened? What did you do? How did you manage it? How did you navigate through it? Number 4 is reflect on something that someone has done for you that has made you happy or thankful or grateful. Ultimately, once again, what happened? How did it impact you? What were the end results? How did it motivate you? Then number 5, discuss an accomplishment event, something basically that sparked a period of growth, some realization, some aha moment, some, oh, dang, this is how life works. Something of that sort where you had a different understanding of yourself or of the world around you. Number 6, something you love doing so much, you lose track of all time. And no, scrolling and gaming don't really count. Gaming, if you're doing something with the gaming outside of just playing the games, maybe you're designing games, maybe you're testing games, that's different. But if you're just spending time in front of a screen, not productively necessarily, that doesn't really count. Just consuming information, let's put it that way. Just consuming information, that doesn't really count. And number 7. So number 7 is share an essay on a topic of your own choice. Now, I do want to caution you here. Most students are not phenomenal writers. They're not strong writers. And even the ones who are strong writers. Now, I don't want to assume, but here's why I'm saying that. It's because number 1, we have not written about ourselves before. So even the strongest of writers are not going to do well writing their college essay. It is rare to have a student who writes a first draft, and then that is also the final draft. Usually they write the first draft, we have to redo some parts of it. We write the second draft, we have to redo some parts of it. And a lot of times teens get stuck on this idea, which also is a thing that's happening in this 2-week college essay intensive we're running, is that they get stuck on this idea and they're like, no, Priyanka, this has to stay. This is who I am. And then, I mean, what am I going to do? Yeah, sure. Okay. And then we wait and we try and work with the idea. And there's a point when the teenager themselves is like, yeah, I don't think this is the vibe that I want. But that also took time. So when you're writing your essay, it's important to factor in that, yes, the writing style in itself is challenging because we are the subject, which is new for us. But then also there will be moments the teens are they're really attached to an idea and they want to keep rolling with the idea. And sometimes you have to leave that time out to say, okay, cool, let's see where it takes you. Go play with it. And then we'll see what the final result is, if you like it or if you end up hating it. And at some point, week down the line, probably 3 weeks down the line or 2 weeks down the line, the team's going to be like, yeah, no, that's not working. And that's when you have to basically highlight a lot of things. And I don't usually delete. We just move them to a different document so that it's still there for reference, but we metaphorically delete. Okay. So you have to leave time out for that. So with that said, and why I'm referencing all of that is don't choose option number 7 unless you are a phenomenal writer. Most of us need guardrails. We need some instruction as to where this essay that I've never written before is supposed to go. So it's better to choose one of the prompts, and it's rare you'll write something that doesn't fall into one of those categories. So it's better to choose from one of the prompts instead of choosing option number 7. All right. Any questions so far? Post in the chat or unmute yourself. No? Okay. Like I said, I'll still be monitoring the chats. If you do have questions along the way, just let me know. Okay. Types of college essays. So here are a couple of things. We have the most common one, which are the prompts that we looked at, which come from the Common App, which is the Common application. The prompts we looked at, so we're good to go for that. Now, other ones. Some universities don't accept college essays. Instead, they have their own written pieces that they want. And the University of California system, as an example, does not do college essays. They have 5 shorter essays they want you to write instead. Okay, so point being, you should be aware of what the criteria are for the essays for the universities that you want to apply to. Then we have optional essays. Optional essays are usually in the additional information section, which is right underneath your writing, the college essay section of the Common App. And they will ask you about any kind of life disasters you might have faced or life impact, whether that is health, natural disaster, family situations, financial situations, something that ultimately may have impacted your ability to study, to perform in school, to perform in extracurricular activities, to participate in extracurricular activities, and so on. So there's that optional essay, and then there is a separate additional information where it says, are there any qualifications that you would like to share? Any additional qualifications that are not mentioned previously that you would like to share? And here, most teens tend to say no. I recommend saying yes. Find something else to talk about that has not been covered in your college essay or in your activity section or anywhere, or in your supplements. because ultimately what happens is that there's only limited word count in your entire application. Activity section, it's limited word count. You have only 10 activities you can put in, and description for those activities is it's 150 characters. Then some universities will ask for a resume, but not all. So once again, we lose airtime there to talk about this thing that had a massive impact on me. College essay is an option, but again, you can really only pick the one massive idea you want to talk about. So you could have 3 sides of yourself that are big, had an impact, you pushed yourself to grow in, but you have to pick maybe the one, because there is such a thing as trying to squeeze in too many ideas into this one small written piece. So once again, if that's the situation, then you want to use this additional information section to expand. Okay. Already the application is stingy with the word count. We want to take all the airtime we can get, let's say the face-to-face time, so to speak, that we can get with the admissions rep to make our case for us. And finally, we have the supplemental essays. And supplemental essays are in addition to the college essay or the personal insight questions. And these can be questions like, why us? How do you plan to contribute to our community, our university's community? How have you contributed to your community? Tell us about an extracurricular that you enjoy doing so much, and how it's impacted you. So they could be normal, or they can be super weird. Tell us your favorite song. Why is that your favorite song? Tell us what page 123 of your autobiography would look like. If you could teach a class, what would it be? If you could invent or uninvent something, what would it be? That sort of thing. And these supplemental topics are the ones that come out on August 1st. Okay, so be ready. Quite a bit of writing coming your way. But it's all doable. If you spread this out enough, it's all doable. You can still have your summer, still have a life, but I usually ask my students to dedicate maybe 1 to 2 hours a weekday for this. So you can still have the weekends off, but spend 1 to 2 hours in a weekday just poking at something college related. Supplemental essays. So we've talked about the college essay. Now we have the supplemental essay. Supplemental essay, as I said, are the written pieces. They're the additional pieces. They could be anywhere from 150 words, which is about a paragraph-ish, to 250 words, which is about 2 paragraphs. That's the most common range we see. With that said, I have a student right now who has a 500-word supplemental that he's going to be writing. So it's up to the university. It varies. There's unfortunately no uniformity. There's no one set standard that, hey, this is what all supplementals, how long they should be, or the topic that it should be. So very, very different from the college essay. Of course, and I mentioned some of these before, so now you have them as a visual. Okay, I'm going to pass by that one because we're going to look at that in a bit. So what makes a good college essay? Again, and I will keep circling back to this, your reader is someone who is exhausted. Even if that is a 25-year-old teaching assistant, or somebody who works for the admissions department, or it's the 65, 70-year-old retired individual who is doing this part-time. Both are actual audiences, both are actual individuals universities hire to help them get through this busy season. Usually they'll be the first tier of your readers, not your final decision makers, but they will be the first filter. Okay, so if they have a lot on their plate, think of yourself with a lot on your plate. You're going to want something that captures your attention. And as humans, we do really, really well with stories. We enjoy stories. They grab us because this, in terms of human history, oral tradition and then written tradition is how we have passed on memories, how we've passed on cautionary tales, how we've passed on information about different landscapes, where to go, what to do, what not to eat, and so on. So stories evolutionary are wired into our mind, which means that story approach is going to be what usually appeals to an admissions officer. Okay, we're going to find that appealing. You want to make sure first that you've picked something. Before you get into your essay, think about what it is you want this stranger who knows nothing about you to know about you. They might be able to glean a few things from your GPA. Maybe you have a really high GPA and that indicates you're a strong student. Maybe you've taken a lot of AP classes, which again indicates that, yes, you're going to do well in an academic atmosphere. Maybe you're a track star, or you've just participated in track, even if you may not have ranked in any way, but you've participated in track, which tells us, okay, you're good at pushing yourself, because track is more of an individual independent sport than it is a team sport, which then by contrast, if you were on the soccer team or the football team, well, now we know that you work well with others, right? So there's some things we can glean from your activities, but not everything. And again, it is just gleaning. We don't know how miserable you might have had it. We don't know how awesome you might have had it. We don't know anything about any details, really. We don't know if you were fighting yourself to put yourself on stage in theater because you're really shy and you still wanted to overcome that. So you forced yourself up on stage, which I had a student who did a few years back. But we never would have known that from you just reading your list of activities. So when you're looking at your college essay, you have to look at your values. What is it that you would not be you without? And no, your phone doesn't count. I have too many students who this round, it hasn't been as crazy of a struggle to come up with topics. It has been a struggle, but what's happened in previous years and even a few months ago with the current seniors is that, or current, I guess, college freshmen, is that a lot of them don't have hobbies. They don't have ideas of what to write about, because every time they're free, they're on their phones or on their computers, or they're it's either scrolling and sending messages or watching viral stuff, or sometimes they just say, oh, I'm hanging out with friends. And then what do you do together? Well, we're usually on our phones or we're on some piece of tech. So that last year was an issue. And hopefully this year we have some topics. Now, a question I received in the chat is, what is a typical format that college essays take? MLA, APA, etc. It's a free write. It doesn't matter what format you have it, as long as you've carried the solid idea. Now, a good resource is if you Google Johns Hopkins essays that worked, you're going to have an archive of about 42, so let's say 40 plus college essays that you can read through. And these essays are going to have the admissions committee's comments. You're going to see all kinds of different formats. Some you're going to like, some you're just going to say, ugh, why would they pick that as something that goes on their website? But the fact that the admissions committee's comments are there sort of helps us understand what the university reps are looking for. So check out the archive of Johns Hopkins essays that worked. But in the meantime, when you're thinking for yourself about what you can write about, again, what is the one value? What is the one thing I've struggled in? What is the one thing maybe it's hard work? Okay, great. But what does hard work look like? And let me see okay, that actually brings me to this. So when I said the example of hard work, a lot of students, even right now in that 2-week intensive we're doing, this is our second week, tomorrow's Thursday. So yeah, we're almost done with it. 2 more sessions. But a lot of students are like, I work really hard, or I value hard work. I've learned to improve myself through this hard work and putting in effort. I go to every practice, whatever. But here's the thing. What do you mean by hard work? Does hard work mean that you are in the gym every single day after school for about an hour, weight training, cardio, whatever it takes before you go to your actual sports practice so that you're training yourself? Does hard work mean that you are managing a stage crew in theater or stage crew, the props department, everybody, because you are the stage manager? So you now have to learn how to communicate with everyone to make sure that you show up early to every single session, because if you show up on time or late, then everyone else follows your example and says, well, if the stage manager is not showing up, I don't have to show up. So is that what hard work means? Does hard work mean that you have now had to practice over and over and over for a certain class, go through hours of tutoring, watch YouTube videos or Khan Academy videos, take practice tests, do lots of practice questions because that math class is kicking your butt? So you've done maybe 20 to 40 problems per night for a week to make sure you get better at it, right? Every single one of those scenarios is of hard work, but every single one of those scenarios just painted a different picture and took your mind in a completely different direction. So you want to make sure that when a reader pulls out your essay, there is no guesswork on their end. They don't have to rely on their own experience, because if some student says hard work, well, then I'm going to rely on my definition of hard work. Okay. And my definition of hard work might be, oh, stayed up working on a project, or woke up really early to work on something that's related to their work, spent hours and hours upon doing that, didn't really see the results, and then tried again. And it was emotionally a roller coaster, right? Because that's what I'm associating with somebody who's currently running a consulting practice. That's my definition. That's what I see. Therefore, that's what I define as hard work. But I'm not going to think, because I'm not an athlete, I'm not going to automatically think, oh, they mean in their sport, or, oh, they mean in that particular class where they showed up and the teacher didn't like them and they kept asking for extra help, but it just didn't work out. I'm not going to think that. So don't leave it up to the reader's background to pull together all these strengths. Be direct and paint your picture according to your experience. If it was in theater, great, tell us more about it. If it was in a sport, tell us more about it. If it was in academics, tell us more about it. Then the second is vulnerability balanced with growth. So a lot of students think they have to be perfect, that they have to show that they figured it out. Here's the thing, none of us as humans have it figured out, because the moment we think we have it figured out, something like AI comes along or some massive change comes along and we're all back to ground zero again. Okay, so it's okay that you don't have it figured out. No one's expecting a 17, 18-year-old to have it figured out. It is okay to admit that you were bad at something. But the thing is, when you say that, you also have to tell us what you did to get better or what you are doing to get better. You can't just leave it at, well, I suck at swimming, but I'm on the swim team. And maybe it's a twist of, but it's okay because I'm not focused on the end result of winning competitions. I'm challenging myself instead because I'm not necessarily an athlete. So the fact that I'm even in the pool at 5 a.m. for practice before school is a big deal to me. That was a recent conversation with a student yesterday. So it depends on the angle you take. You don't have to be the best of the best just because you're in the sport. You don't have to be the MVP. You don't have to be the straight A student. It's okay. But tell us what you're prioritizing and then walk us through that. Self-awareness is important. So again, when you're telling the story, don't overly brag about yourself, but also don't blow it off. Now, what do I mean by blow it off? Some students describe the events without really including their personal emotional level, the struggle or the growth or the situation that they had to navigate internally. So they're going to describe, oh, well, we were at the pool, and this is also a recent example, that we were at the pool and it was the 4th of July barbecue. And then this family came over and they asked us if they could use their grill, and they used their grill and they made some really weird food. And everyone else basically, when the family wasn't listening, said, ew, what's that? But I was more open to it. So I just tried it because I'm used to weird foods because of my culture. So I already come from a culture that has, notice what happened is that she's describing all of that. And then she just kept talking about the event. She's like, so that's what I do. And then in Model UN, we always have to argue with people about all of this. And I hear them out. And then even when I don't like it, and then we come to a resolution, and that's it. That's not, you're just telling us, you're listing what happened. If somebody was watching, we would semi see that happening, but we don't know what your internal state is. So we need to know what your internal state is when you're telling us. It's not reporting. That brings us to the next point. You're not just reporting, you're telling us the story. There has to be a voice to it, an attitude to it. And there's a student I had, man, was it yesterday? Yesterday was intense, and even today was intense. So I guess, yeah, it was yesterday. I had a student who finally, as I mentioned, how teens are very determined to stay on this one topic, or that one thing, that one paragraph they wrote, that they will defend it with their entire honor. So I finally looked up and I said, hey, look, I read 3 essays earlier today and they at least had me upbeat. And then I get to yours and your intro just exhausted me. It brought me down. This is depressing. And what happened is then that voice and tone automatically, again, for someone, I had only read 3 essays prior to him from that college essay intensive. I had only read 3. Then when I got to his, I was already feeling down after having already been on an up cycle. Your reader has skimmed through dozens, if not hundreds in a day. Don't be that person who's bringing them down. Okay. So your voice and your tone matter. Are you going to be lighthearted about your stage fear? Are you going to be completely serious about your stage fear? What tone are you taking? Is this going to be a nice joking, or is it going to be a nice explanation? Is it just, don't make it negative? Okay. You can include negative chunks in there, but that should not be your start. Then you could say, I was frustrated, I was hating on everything, I didn't want to show up to practice, da da da. But then again, you flip it. It's a sandwich. You start with a positive, you might mention the small negative, and then once again, you're back on the massive positive again. You got to use a strong hook, because again, if I don't want to read after the first 2 lines of your essay, do you really think that I'm going to continue to genuinely pay attention to the rest of your essay? Okay. And that's basic. A lot of this is basic human behavior, but we don't think about it because we're on the writer's side. We're not on the reader's side. So from a writing standpoint, we're like, yeah, this is who I am, and I have to put this on paper. And they get it. They get what I mean when I say that. No, they don't. They really don't. And you thought that was a good hook, but they've already read another 12 essays or 25 essays before yours. So they've seen variety. Okay. So you have to use a strong hook if you want them to actually commit to your essay. And then of course, vivid details, emotional beats, jump emotions. You don't just want to be positive the whole time, because then we get it. We want to cheer you on, but we can't cheer you on if you're already positive the whole time. If we haven't seen you in a slump, then we don't really feel the need to be like, yeah, come on, keep going. This kid's awesome. Like, he's still trying, or she's still trying. We don't have anything. So you got to vary your emotions a little. And keep in mind, you felt these emotions already when you were in that situation. Okay. I don't think any of us, or at least most of us, don't walk through life constantly feeling positive, even from a minute to minute basis. So then put those emotional changes, some of them, not everything, but into your essay. Now, question in the chat is, how formal should the tone of the essay be? It does not have to be formal, but with that said, don't use slang and try to stay away from overly using contractions. Okay. But it doesn't have to be formal. It can be it can be like 2 levels up from just having a normal conversation with your friends. Let's put it that way. So whatever I'm doing right now, when I talk, I don't think I'm being overly formal with this tone and with my word choices. Think this, but maybe slightly more than that. Okay. So I'm not about to walk into a board meeting to do anything, but we're somewhere in between. And again, check out the essays that worked, Johns Hopkins essays that worked for the whole archive, and you'll see what I mean. Okay, mistakes. Going back to we feel like we always have to be positive. Or sorry, we always have to be impressive. We always have to be that MVP. That's not true. They don't need the MVP. They know that realistically, it's not possible that every single student coming out of your high school is all the best at this sport, that you as one person are great at your job and at community service and at your grades and also at your sports, and you have a fall sport and a winter sport and you have a club team that you make it to, and somehow in all of this, you're still getting 8.5 hours of sleep. It's just not happening. Okay, something took a hit. So it's okay if you're honest. Cliches, oh dear God. Okay. A couple weeks ago, I sent out an email to everyone about a couple of the cliches in the list, and maybe you have it, and maybe not. Let me mention a few of them. So please don't call anything life-changing or eye-opening, because at that point, teens, we want to look at you and be like, yes, there are some people who have really been through some things in life. But for most of you, we want to say, what do you mean you've life changed? What do you mean you have eye-opening experience? Just, it's overly used. So life-changing, let me go through the list. Life-changing, we've eye-opening, we have I couldn't believe this happened, or this was you know what? I'm going to send out the list. I will send out the list when I send out the recording for this video, but there's a list of phrases and then there's a list of topics. So phrases, that's what I'm blanking on at the moment, but let's talk about topics. Common topics that teens try to use. One, mental health. I know at this stage in our life, human development, we have a lot of diagnosis of anxiety and depression and ADD and ADHD. And honestly, it sucks. But as I said, unfortunately, this is becoming more and more common, which means everyone wants to write about it. And I get it. It is an obstacle that you've overcome. But if everyone's writing about the same topic, you really need to be mindful of just how you're approaching it. Another option I'm going to give you for anything serious. Oops, that was odd. All my cables just fell. Weird. Anyway, another option I'm going to give you for the serious topics is use the additional information section. So that section about the COVID or mental health, or it's anything that can basically impacted you and impacted your ability to perform in school. Use that section to talk about the mental health or the family dynamics or whatever else was happening in your life. The sports injury, that's another very common topic most students talk about. So this is where all of that can go. All right. Then the next topic that's also cliche, sometimes it's cultural topics. So I'll give you an example. It's going to seem like a stereotype, but but it's true. So as an Indian, I was in the math club, right? And Indians are usually associated with the STEM fields, the math and science and so on. Now, did I participate in the math club? No, but that's a different story. Either way, I was the math club. Certain ethnicities are more inclined to play instruments. Like we have, again, you know what? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Let's say Asians tend to be associated with playing the violin. There are certain stereotypes that exist in culture. And that's because, you know what? All our parents talk to each other. And when the parents talk to each other, they're like, what's your kid doing? Okay, well, you know what? Sounds like my kid should sign up for that too. And that's how it becomes a massive cultural movement. But that means everyone's writing about the same thing. Okay. That means that if I am writing about the math club or the robotics club, and so is that other Indian person, and we all have, let's say, similar grades and similar SAT scores, well, then it's an eeny, meeny, miny, mo for that admissions officer to be like, okay, great. Who do we pick? Her or her? We need to match the female quota. We might need to match the diversity quota, but they're both very similar. They don't really stand out. So eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Okay. So that happens when you use the cliche topics that may be either cultural, that may be either just common in society, like that sports injury, like that mental health challenge. So be mindful of that. Then being too vague or being too descriptive about the wrong thing. So this is where the being too descriptive actually is something I've seen again in the last few days. So being too vague, we talked about it in that example of hard work. Now, being too vague was the hard work, but then being too descriptive in the wrong direction is that example I gave you of that student with the barbecue. So she kept describing the events that were happening in front of her, but not necessarily what that meant internally for her. I had another student who did the same thing, or who is, as of yesterday, no longer doing the same thing, but he was, which is he kept describing the events in school for a school election, for one of the school organizations he's a part of, and then how he was expecting to win, even because that's what was ensured. You know, the teacher had told him, oh yeah, it looks like you're a shoo-in. All his peers had said, oh yeah, you're a shoo-in. So it's only natural he got his hopes up. And then he ended up losing. But then he kept talking about and then I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this, and I did this. But what was your emotional journey? We don't need the step-by-step of what happens next. We want to know how you were feeling. Oh, I struggled in the beginning, but you know what? I still decided that I'm just going to show up for my new role, because if I have it, then I'm not just going to wing it. I'm not just going to do this to put it on a college application. I'm actually going to show up for it. So he should have said something like that. Turning it into a resume. This is very, very tempting to try to take as many of your activities as possible and just connect the dots somehow, even if these activities seem very disconnected, to somehow connect the dots and put them all in your essay. Pick one topic you want to write about on your essay. And then if an activity matches that topic, go ahead and mention it. But if it does not match the topic, leave it. It can stay in the activity section. It can be added onto your resume, but don't force it into your college essay. Your essay should not be a resume. And this, I'll be honest, it happens a lot when parents feel like, oh, but we need to talk about how awesome this kid is. Make sure that he's mentioning this, and make sure he's mentioning this, and make sure she's saying that, and make sure she's saying that too. And that's true. It's all true. But there's only so much we can fit into this essay before we just lose the plot. So be mindful of that. Lack of reflection, we've kind of talked about, is when you just describe everything else, like the excessive narrative, but with no takeaway. You're not really talking about yourself. Maybe you're blaming other people for something that happened, but ultimately it's not about you and your growth, which is the real theme amongst all of these prompts that they gave us. It's you and your growth, whatever topic and category you want to pick. And then great, what did you learn from it? How did you grow from it? If we had to water it down, distill it to the main, what do they want to know about me? It's that. Oversharing trauma, any family situations that might have happened. And yes, I am aware some of you have been through some insane stuff. This is not the place to put it. Like I said, save that for the additional information section, whether that means you're figuring out your medications right now for your ADHD because you were just diagnosed in junior year. So therefore, problem is not solved, problem has been identified, and now we're testing dosages and different meds. And therefore you're losing sleep and you're losing your appetite and all of this is happening and we're in the testing phase. Okay, cool. Mention that in the additional information section and use a very matter-of-fact tone. At that point, there is no storytelling. There is no trying to gain sympathy and a pity me approach. It's simply an FYI, this is why my GPA may not reflect my best performance. It's because I didn't actually know I was dealing with this until I just got diagnosed with it. And now we're working on it as a family. Okay, so don't overshare traumas. Don't make it awkward for the reader. They're not therapists. They're not licensed doctors and psychiatrists. They can't really do anything for you except hold that paper and be like, well, shit. But that doesn't mean that they can admit you because of that. There might be some other requirement they have that you don't meet. Maybe they're looking for geographical diversity. And then you laid your trauma and you're not from the region that they were hoping to pull students from. So it puts them in a really weird situation. Grammatical errors at this stage are just unacceptable. We have automatic spell check on our Google Docs, on our Word documents. And then on top of that, a lot of students have Grammarly downloaded. So this is just inexcusable and it's careless. I've had students spell certain things wrong when they write up their activity sections. They won't uppercase a title when it should be, but they're like, oh, no, I did it. And I submitted this application. And I'm like, screen share. No, it's fine. I got it. Screen share. And they still submit the application. And then in the future, when I convince them to finally screen share before we send to another university, that's when I catch some of the grammatical mistakes. So there's no reason at this point. Just this, I think, is probably what would irk me the most, because all our software now makes it obvious that we've misspelled something or something just doesn't fit or we use the wrong version of there or whatever. And then finally is either not getting feedback from anyone or getting feedback from too many people. Not getting feedback from anybody, that doesn't work. And I usually tell my students that, you know what, I can't count as one of your feedbacks because I'm too close to the story too. You've explained to me all the background. You explained to me what led up to it, what you did through it, all of it. And I know you, so I'm cheering for you. And yes, I'm going to catch a lot of the grammatical stuff, sentence structure, etc. But you might have said an idea that for me made sense because now I know the backstory behind it. But then when we give it to a friend, we give it to a family friend who knows you, but not that well, they suddenly are like, wait, what do you mean by that sentence? That's not clear. What do you mean by that sentence? Is this what you meant? Because that's worded weird. So you need feedback from, I would say a safe number is about 2 to 3 people. And ideally people who don't know you as well or are not going to be nice to you, they're going to be kind to you. So they're not just going to look at it and say, oh, but that's so amazing. You did such a great job. I love this essay. It's awesome. We don't need that kind of feedback. We need them to tell us at least 2 things that's wrong with it, because no matter how great the essay is, you will find 2 things. So we need someone who's going to be genuine about their feedback, not somebody who's going to butter you up and say, oh yeah, that's perfect. You wrote such a great essay. Wow. That we don't need that part. And friends tend to want to be nice to us. They don't want to hurt our feelings. So now the question is, what do we write about? And I don't know what I did with the animation there. Okay. So probably need to, questions on anything? Okay. All right. What are your core values? Okay. Come up with the 1 or 2, come up with the 1 or 2 values that absolutely make you you. Maybe that's curiosity. Maybe that is hard work. Maybe that is growth. Maybe that is a gratitude. Maybe that is family, that you want to be around your peers, your family, and having your traditions with your family are very important to you. And I've had a student write about that too. Maybe it's about exploring international cultures. What, when diluted, can we say that this is who you are? Who are the people who are most important to you? Why? Now, write the stories in your planning process. Don't write about them in your college essay. No more than 2 to 3 sentences about that person. Because I have had students who want to write about their grandfathers or other family members, their dads or their moms, or just different members of the family and how they contributed to them becoming who they are. But then the essay being about other people. Okay. And we don't want the essay to be about other people. We want the essay to be about you. So then the risk ends up that there's too much airtime for other people. And we barely learn anything about you, except these other people are not the ones going to college. You are. So be aware of that, but write the stories down in your planning and then figure out, okay, but what made that important to me? What do they all have in common? Maybe it's that we got together and there was food involved and everyone was sharing stories and no one was on their phone. So there was a whole massive vibe going. What's the time you changed your mind about something? That can be something because you argued with a friend. Maybe that's something you did in a classroom in a discussion. Maybe that was in debate. Maybe that was with a sibling. Although I will never tell my brother he was really right about anything. So we'll see how you guys pan out on that. But maybe that was something you saw on the news or even you saw on social media and that idea hadn't occurred to you before. When did you feel like, oh, wow, that's a dimension of life I didn't think about? Or, oh, I thought that, but that person is living their life this way and they're not wrong either. And then if you had to teach a class on something, what would it be? So it's like a subtle way of saying, what are you really good at? Or what are you really interested in? Okay, if you're so great, if you're so into it that you could teach a class, then maybe that's something that might be worth writing about. I had a student who wrote about his sneaker resale business. And that was a cool concept because that involves a lot of being proactive, looking for deals to buy the original sneakers, figuring out how to then sell the sneakers and authenticate them so that you're not buying fake stuff and wasting your money and being tricked into things. So think about what you could teach a class on. The thing no one knows about me is, and that's my friends really know about this, don't know this about me. I haven't talked about it to anybody, but here's what I'm really into, or here's what I've been dealing with or struggling with, or what I've been exploring on my own. A moment that changed the way I think is, which again goes back to what's the time that you changed your life. And then I'm most myself when I'm doing what, or I'm around who. And what does most myself mean? Does that mean you just let go and you're goofing off? That you decide that you and your friends decide you're just going to go build something out of wood. You go to Home Depot and figure out a project, even though you mess it up, you still keep trying. What does it mean when we say when you're most yourself? How do you define that? Okay, so these are just a couple of launching pads, let's put it that way, into how you can plan your essay. Okay, before we go into that, any questions? Post in the chat, or you can unmute yourself, whichever feels best for you. Okay. All right, structure. Now, again, if you're a strong writer, you really don't need me to tell you the structure. But if you need somewhere to start, because like I said, we haven't really done this before. So sometimes it's just hard. We don't know where to start. So here's my suggested structure. Start with your hook, whatever the topic is, possibly a description format for your hook. And then a snapshot. If you're doing a change over time, this is who I was before, this is who I was after. I suggest that your hook is not about who you were before, because that's more on the negative side, but about who you are now. So if you're giving a speech, then bring us into when you're giving this phenomenal speech, and then say, oh, but it wasn't actually like that. In fact, in 8th grade, I messed up on stage and I was shaking the whole time. My voice was trembling and the paper just kept, it's like the words just kept moving. So I didn't know what I was saying. But then I decided what triggered you. You could have stayed awful at this activity, whatever it was, maybe public speaking, maybe it was the sport, maybe it was the grade, maybe it was the way that this club and team was running and it didn't work. And now what was the point that just peeved you off? Or you said, I can't keep going like this. I don't want to go like this. And then what happened? How did you go and change? What did you do to put that effort in? Again, going back to the example, I went to the gym every single day after school. You're painting the picture there as well, right? Sometimes you don't have to say the value. You don't have to say, I work hard. Show us that you worked hard. I went to the gym every single day. I had to start watching what I ate. I couldn't just eat everything, even though I was a teenager. I knew my metabolism, as everyone says, my metabolism can take it. But if I wanted to perform on the court, on the field, then I knew I had to stop eating like shit. Obviously, don't say shit. And then I also had to make sure I'm going to sleep on time, making sure that I realize where my weaknesses are and start working on them. And also that I'm not a jerk to other people just because I'm good at this sport or this activity, but I've actually been helping mentor the younger players, right? So that's part of that reflection, part of that growth as well. And then this is what I plan to take with me. So like connected in some way. Maybe it's that I don't know what it is I want to do with my future, but you know what? I'm going to take my curiosity with me and I'll figure it out. I'm going to trust that I can figure this out. Note what happens. You don't have to know the answer to your future. I have a student right now. We literally wrote what I just said, some idea of, yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do in my future, but I'm going to take this, what I've learned so far with me. So it's okay if you say, I don't know what I want to major in. Okay. Now we're going to do activities of which sounds better. I wonder what I did with the formatting. Okay. So what sounds better? This one, I think the titles kind of give it away, but general intro, which is what a lot of people lean towards, is ever since I was a child, and these are all hooks. So this is the starting of your essay. Ever since I was a child, I've always loved science. Now, I had students who write in this format. If it's not about science, it's about something else, but they're just explaining it, getting philosophical about it. But get me into the story first. By the time the smoke detector started screaming, I'd already decided that experiment was worth repeating. Automatically, I want to know, what the hell were you doing? I'm going to keep reading. Okay. That first statement, most people will say it, particularly all the students who want to be in pre-med. Oh, I've always wanted to help people. That's the most common phrase I hear. I've always wanted to help people. And so I want to go into medicine. Okay, great. Everyone who wants to be a doctor is approaching it from that angle. That's not making you stand out. But that second one pulled me in. I want to know what the heck you were doing. Then, so this is a reflection versus the story. Now, failure has taught me many valuable lessons throughout my life. Not a great way to start. Once again, you're true. It probably has taught you a lot of valuable lessons, but that's not the first sentence I want to see. Whereas I stared at the scoreboard long after everyone else had left the field. Okay, why were you doing that? Notice automatically I had questions pop up in my mind because of the statement this teenager made. Okay, this is when students try to go deep and it just does not work. So life is a journey filled with twists and turns that shape who we become. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is also an example of another cliche. These philosophical, massive life definitions, when you haven't shown us the story or that struggle that you've had, if this was a conclusion, yes, that's okay. But if you're going to start it or use this in the middle, that's too early in the game. I still don't have enough of a picture, so I'm not as invested, which means you just sound like a generic teen philosopher, podcaster, and so on, right? So I'm not connected to you. I don't care if it's in the beginning or in the middle, but at the end, if you're concluding after you've taken us through this, here's what happened, and here's what happened, and then I had to pivot this way, and I had to pivot this way, and I had to pivot this way, and I had to pivot this way. Well, now we saw your twists and turns. So yeah, I can now believe you when you say life is full of twists and turns and you understand it. Okay. So then we're going to go the other example. So the genuine, you're not Greek. So this is about a student who was going into the Greek or like a youth group, but he wasn't actually part of the faith. So you're not Greek. The woman beside me whispered with a smile as I took my seat on the front pew. Yeah. Okay, well, that's a weird thing to tell somebody. Now I kind of want to know who the heck you are. If you're not Greek, what? Where are you? Why does someone feel comfortable saying that to you? Another idea. So this is an idea that somebody wanted to start with versus an experience approach. Remember, these are all descriptive. All of these are all descriptive, but they're different ways of descriptive. The idea. I've always believed curiosity is one of the most important qualities a person can have. Again, it's like the generic philosopher. Why? I wasn't supposed to be at a Greek Orthodox youth group meeting, but by then everyone had stopped questioning why I kept showing up. Okay, I don't think there are many teenagers who just decide they want to walk into basically a youth group on purpose, right? There might be teenagers who are willing to get out of it. There might be teenagers who enjoy it, but if you're not supposed to be there and then you decide to walk in, now we kind of want to know what and why, to the point that people used to question you and stopped. So in every single one of these intros, there's a curiosity that's been raised. And even if I was exhausted, it's like watching that movie that you have to finish, or that book that you started and you're like, I have to know the ending. Now, if you're somebody like me, you just jump straight to the ending and you fast forward through the movie and you're like, well, cool, this is how it ended. But I hear most people actually read the books and watch the movies. They don't just Wikipedia things like I do. So your essay admissions officer is probably going to also read through or skim through your essay. They're not just going to jump to the end like I probably would. So those are a couple of examples for you. Now, a couple of tips for parents. Support, don't write. I've had parents who've written entire college essays and then parents have been upset that their teen doesn't want that writing. But support, give them ideas of, oh, and parents, you guys are really great at remembering things. I had to call up a mom on Monday because I'm like, your teen is drawing a blank. Can you tell me what she has been up to? And then mom knows examples from back when you were 10. Okay. To this day, my mother knows my SAT and ACT scores, and I don't. So parents, you're amazing at remembering things about your teens. Help them come up with ideas if they're drawing a blank. And when you are writing on their paper, just on their Google Doc or wherever they're putting their essay, provide feedback only after they have something on paper. Because a lot of times teens will be like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. And then what do I write about next? And then what do I write about next? And they kind of just squeeze the idea out of you. So it's still, they basically tricked you into writing their essay for them. I know, because a lot of teens try to do this to me too. They're like, oh, but that wording, what's the wording that I could use for this? And I have now learned that I basically need to speak at like a 5th grade level. So an unacceptable level. And parents, if you ever see my comments on some of your teens' work, if we're working together, it's going to sound like I don't speak English. And that is on purpose, because teens will then copy and paste what I wrote into their essay. And that's not the point of the feedback. It's to encourage you to make the change. And sometimes I'll pose examples of like, oh, it could have been something like this. But it's purposely grammatically messed up. Don't get caught up in the grammar at first. This is for teens and for parents. That's not your priority. Your priority is to have a complete draft from top to bottom where you understand how you're going to have this whole thing flow, because that's the complication. Teens, you may write the perfect intro, but then they get stuck with, okay, but where do I go with this now? What do I want to mention later? And then what do I want to mention? And then how am I supposed to conclude with this? So the intro could be beautiful, but then what? So instead, weave together your entire draft, and then make sure your ideas are concrete before you start fixing the grammar, making the long sentences shorter, spacing things out so that you have standalone sentences. All of that, that's a later thing. First is just idea. The core concept needs to flow from top to bottom. If you're going to be helping brainstorm, again, please ask thoughtful questions. Again, like I said, you guys have parents remember things. So remind them of things, but ask them, okay, why do you hang out with that friend? Why do you do that one activity? What is it about it that's so appealing to you? But why is it that you're super into this debate club? What is it about debate that you really enjoy? Couldn't you technically argue anywhere else or think about it anywhere else? And when you ask that why, okay, but then why? What happens is you get past the surface level answers. Oh, why do you want to be in debate? Well, let's me practice my public speaking. Okay, but why is that important to you to practice your public speaking? Well, because I want to be able to talk about the thoughts in my head. Okay, but why is that important? Well, because if I'm in a situation where I need to be able to persuade somebody, why is that important to you, right? So it keeps going down until there's one point where the teen either gets mad at you because they're like, why do you keep asking me this? Or no, that's it. That's why. But that final why is very different from where you started with this superficial. So that's how you can take a topic that seems generic up top because everybody's in debate club or everybody's in Model UN or everyone's playing soccer, whatever it is, and then have it come out to something unique because that motivation factor was something different. All right. So that's how brainstorming can work, is just asking, and poking. Ideal timeline. So ideally, essay drafted before senior year starts or by September. I actually, like I said at the beginning of the call, I would say this month, because then what's going to happen is August 1st, the applications open and you will be busy with your supplemental essays. You might be busy with your resume, which I hope you do now as well, but you might be busy with your resume. You might be busy with your summer work. You might be busy with your school starting up any kind of sports conditioning, band, theater, whatever summer activities tend to happen for your extracurricular activities. Or you might be busy with your job, or a lot of families also plan their vacations in August. So August is generally tends to be busy. So if possible, start your essay now and then work on your supplementals in August. But ideally, before you start school, you want 98% of all this application stuff out of the way. Because going into senior year, having been through this, it's hard to pin students down to even have sessions with me. And I'm an accountability person, right? If they showed up, we're moving forward. But a lot of times they just cancel. They're like, oh, but I have this test coming up. I have this project coming up. I have this for extracurriculars. So they're not slacking, but they just have other conflicts for their time. So now imagine what happens if they're working on this on their own. Then all of a sudden things get pushed until the deadline comes up or a week away from the deadline. And suddenly we have to make this essay, or we end up submitting an essay that hasn't had feedback. And done genuinely does not need to be perfect. I've had students who 2 years down the line, after they look at their essay and they're like, I can't believe I wrote that. It's awful. Yes, it's awful from the person who now advanced in their writing skills. It's awful because somebody in college, you were forced to improve your writing skills. But for somebody in high school, this is where your current level of writing is at. And this is what the admissions officers are expecting. As long as it is genuine, polished, it's not going around in circles, repeating the same details over and over, you're moving the story forward, you've made sure your grammar and your ideas all connect, then that is sort of the perfect that we're aiming for. Okay. I think everyone here is from my newsletter, so I don't have to ask you to subscribe. But if you aren't from my newsletter, then this is what I send out every month. If you're interested, it's a breakdown by grade, and some of these will also have links attached to them. So your link to the Common App, your link to the college essays topics, or sample essays, or SAT stuff, prep resources, and so on. So if you're interested, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll add you onto the list. I used to have a QR code, but I'm always messing with my website. So, all right, any questions on anything? I think we're on time. Yeah. Any questions on anything, whether it's the intro of the essay, when do we have to do anything, what should we write about? common mistakes. Do you feel that you've gotten what you wanted from our session today? You can feel free to unmute yourself, feel free to post in the chat. Okay. Thank you for that feedback. Thank you, Vincent. Okay, we have, okay. I want to make sure I'm addressing your concerns. And a lot of it is that descriptive and the samples that we saw, that those are the most common mistakes, because I think some of you have now heard me say enough times that you should start with a story and start with descriptive. But even in that, there's subtlety to it. So I wanted to make sure that we talked about it. Again, Johns Hopkins Essays That Worked, great resource for an entire archive of styles and what tone you should use and so on. So that's great. And then I am taking on about 1 to 2 more students. So if you're interested, please let me know and I'd be happy to talk to you about it. But other than that, thank you so much for coming tonight. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. Let me